I just want to preface this by Rob asked me to talk about Team Rubicon, I think, because some of the times when we're on these Saturday mornings or whatever, I'm off doing something with Team Rubicon. And it's interesting that the way I heard about Team Rubicon was at an ARES meeting about 3.5 years ago, one of them out in Kearney Mesa, you know, out on Kearney Villa or whatever it is. And I can't remember the person's name, but he was invited because he's a ham radio operator and had gone to Puerto Rico after the hurricane and set up communications when there were no communications. And it was such an interesting talk. I was sitting there Googling Team Rubicon and wound up joining just because of that. So I'm hoping this morning that we can get one or more of you to join. And the one thing I'll say, and I'm going to try to say 5 times during the presentation, is there's a role for absolutely every one of us in Team Rubicon. Whatever your interest is, whatever your skills are, whatever it is you want to learn how to do that you've never done before, there's something for everyone, and I'll try to show you some of the variety. Let me share my screen. So, and I'm going to get rid of this. And if somebody has a question, I guess somebody will monitor the chat box. So what is Team Rubicon? Let's see, I guess I have to use this. Well, it's an organization that was founded in 2010 by 2 Marines. One of them was Jake Wood, who saw the earthquake and the devastation there and decided they just had to do something. So they self-deployed, went to Haiti, helped with their EMT skills. And after that, to make a long story short, Jake Wood founded, with 2 others, founded Team Rubicon to respond to other disasters. They now operate both domestically and internationally. They're about 150,000 members, some very active, some hardly active at all. The key thing about this organization is you can join and you can pick and choose what you want to do, how much time you have. There's no pressure at all. It's about 70% military, active military and veterans, and about 30%, as they call it, kick-ass civilians. So there's room for everybody, and it's military, it's veteran-led, but there are a large number of civilians who haven't served. And again, I repeat, there is a role for everyone in this organization. There are local leadership positions they're always trying to fill. They follow the incident command system. So what they're always looking for are people interested in any of the roles in the command and general staff, the incident commander, operations, logistics, planning, safety. If you want to use your skills in organization, computer, figuring out what people ought to do, command and general staff's always looking for people. If you want to just go out and just do something in the field and be part of a group that a strike team, you can do that too, and everything in between. They do damage assessment and recon for disasters. They don't respond, well, they're starting to respond right at the time of a disaster and route clearing and things like that. But most of the response, 90% of the response in disasters, is after the event is over and it's really getting the communities back up and running. You can be a strike team member, just a general, as they call them, gray shirts, because everybody wears a gray t-shirt. You can be a chainsaw operator. If anybody has skills as a heavy equipment operator, they've got the Team Rubicon training part of heavy equipment. I saw it actually in the last 2 weeks. They're always looking for those kind of people. And amateur radio, haven't seen much of that other than that talk that we had by whoever it was, some friend of an ARES member. But there is, I saw on Facebook last night, there's going to be somebody is doing an online course to get people to get a technician license. I think that's I don't think you join Team Rubicon just to do amateur radio activities, but it may get incorporated in certain operations. So there's 2 different kinds of responses. There's the national and international responses, and there's local. It used to be mostly national and international, but because of COVID, the best thing that's happened, there's a very large local activities that you can get involved in. But with respect to national and international, there's a national disaster response. Team Rubicon pays all of your expenses to fly somewhere. They want at least a 1-week commitment, and they have flight waves. responding to hurricanes, flooding, tornadoes, fires. There's probably 3 different forward operating bases now in the light of the Hurricane Ida and the hurricanes that have come through Louisiana that are very active right now. There's probably 12 to 15 national responses going on at the present time. And then other national responses are things like vaccines, and I'll talk about vaccinating the Navajo Nation. Team Rubicon has really been incorporated into that. There's the Houston rebuild after the large hurricane there a number of years ago. They have continued to rebuild houses for the needy. And so if you want to go for a week to Houston, and either you have building skills, which is great, or you have none, which would be me, they can use absolutely everybody, and apparently you learn a lot about building if you do that. They've even plussed up, they've got 5 sites operating around the country now at like Fort Bliss, Texas, and other places for the Afghan resettlement, helping with logistics. The international disaster response, they require about a 2+ week commitment. Things like muck out, home repair, debris removal, getting internet up and running for people who have those skills, that sort of business. And there's an international medical team that is accredited by WHO, and they go everywhere: Haiti, Guam, Kazakhstan, Africa, South America, small teams delivering kind of frontline medical care. All of this at the invitation of the communities that they're serving. The local ones I'm excited about because a lot of times you just don't have a week you can go because you've got things, but these are 1+ days. And the local disaster response to fires, such as with fire in Alpine. Remember about 2 months ago, the LA bomb squad got a bunch of explosives and put it in their vehicle to blow up on site and miscalculated the amount of explosives they had and basically blew up a bunch of homes in Los Angeles. They called Team Rubicon the next day, who showed up in force, and in a day had debris cleared, windows boarded, roofs tarped, and all of that kind of business. So there's local responses, lots of local mitigation assistance with the fire safety councils. And that's been a big thing this year, especially if you want to increase your skills as a chainsaw operator. But lots of roles with the Fire Safety Council and also in flood mitigation after the fires. Vaccine assistance, whether it's like the Fontana Speedway had a huge vaccine assistance with not doing the medical part, but helping with directing traffic and just getting people organized. I think one thing about Team Rubicon is they're very, very organized and disciplined. Helping with food banks every Friday, the veterans building up in Oceanside has a food bank, and Team Rubicon has been part of that from the very beginning. And they look forward to that sort of participation. And then neighbors, helping neighbors, and I'll show you an example of that. So the capabilities that are present, general debris removal for disasters, chainsaw operators, heavy equipment, structure demolition, muck outs, tarping, window boarding, access clearing, route clearance. And it's, if you have any of the skills of those things, that's great. If you have none of them, everybody's welcome, and you learn a heck of a lot, and you get a lot of things done. And one thing about this organization, they train you both before disaster. There are certain things you can do, but a lot of on-the-job training as well. So you train, but you do a lot as well. Mitigation, the fire mitigation, fuel modification, defensible spaces, home hardening, creek and culvert clearing. We did some of that up in Elsinore, Lake Elsinore, after a big flood up there, sandbagging, things like that. But again, I'll go back. The key thing is every one of these operations needs people who know how to organize and get things done in the ICS system. So if you've got any experience in logistics, any experience in planning, there is a role for any kind of thing that you might want to do to help out a community in need. And there are only 2 rules. I put these on the slide. The 2 rules are actually, don't be a dick, get shit done. Those are the only 2 rules that really run this organization, and it makes it real simple. And I've never been a part of an organization where in really stressful times, some of the things that we do, everybody is respectful of everybody else. And it really is kind of a great group of people to deal with. In Southern California and across the US, Team Rubicon is focused on low income or elderly, key terrain modifications, and very isolated communities. There was a big effort out in Nilan, out in the Imperial Valley, I guess it is, because they had a big fire that wiped out, essentially destroyed the whole community. And Team Rubicon spent 2 weeks out there in 110-degree heat getting that all cleaned up. Because what they try to do in terms of disasters is to get rid of debris and do expedient home repair enough so that people can take the FEMA money they get and use it to rebuild, as opposed to pay people to clean up and still have nowhere to live. So I'll just give you some of the examples that I've actually done. Fire mitigation has been a big thing this year. Going up to the mountains, the fire safety councils have identified residences or nonprofits like camps where they need fire mitigation and really don't have the funds to be able to do that. And so this is one, I think this was from Idlewild. And if you look at this picture, one of the ladies there is the CFO for a nonprofit. I'm in the middle, and the two guys are actually, Mac and Will, are active Seabees that can come up for weekends and their time off and then help with that. In Crestline, we spent a lot of time in Crestline and fire mitigation. Rob wanted a picture of me with the chainsaw, so that's me bucking a tree that had fallen down. I had never used a chainsaw before Team Rubicon, so it's sort of fun to learn something absolutely different and new, and trying to increase my skills there. The Navajo Nation, I talked about vaccination and testing. I helped in Fontana, directed traffic for 12 hours. Actually, that's my ARES vest, and I've got my ham radio, use it as an FRS hanging for me. And I think we made a big difference in being able to we got that site organized, and they served a lot of people for the initial vaccination. And then in the Navajo Nation, it was really a unique opportunity to go out to the chapter houses that are truly in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico and help with the vaccination. And the Navajo citizens who came were all so appreciative of our efforts to help out. And the people in that picture, Bradley is the man. He is one of the members of the leadership of the Navajo Nation, and his wife. And the woman clear on the left, Peggy, is an Episcopal priest from Boston who joined Team Rubicon, and she was out there helping direct traffic as I was. Fire mitigation and SAWYER proficiency for the last 2 weeks, a week before last, for 2 weeks, I was up in the Lost Valley, which truly is in the middle of nowhere, east of Palomar, off of Chihuahua Valley Road, 10 miles down a gravel road. There's the Scout Reservation there that has a cedar beetle infestation with many hundreds of dead trees. It's about a 300-acre, I think, site. So there's a lot of work to keep trees from falling on scouts' heads when the kids show up in the summertime. So a lot of felling trees. That's a pretty good one. I managed to get down in a reasonable order. We did a lot of wood chipping of all of the stuff, that brush that we cleared up. If anyone saw the movie Fargo, that last scene in the wood chipper, that's what I thought of every time I was dragging things and shoving it in the wood chipper. So individual costs, if for these deployments for Team Rubicon, they pay for everything. You need to have boots and pants and a go bag, but your travel, food, housing, the PPE you wear, laundry, all of that is taken care of by Team Rubicon. Billeting is provided. Here's the picture on the left of the Schoepe camp. They had bunkhouses that had four bunk beds, and only people on the bottom, so there'd be 4 people in each cabin, which was quite nice. The one on the right is back from Hurricane Michael in Panama City. We had, I think, about 100 people in the top floor of a dive school. The top floor was the warehouse, and they pushed all the equipment back and just set up cots. So everybody is kind of living together in a community. So the disaster billeting is a little less opulent, let's say, as the local billeting. And then there's a neighbor helping neighbor. So this is an interesting one. On the left is a woman named Darlene, I think was her name. During the Valley Fire that was in Hamul in 2019, and about September 2019, I was part of the animal response team, and we were behind fire lines helping this lady feed her and water her horses. Her whole property, her house was completely burned to the ground. And so saw her then and wound up talking to her. And then I got a deployment. Team Rubicon said we're helping some some cleanup after a fire up on Lawson Hills Road in Hamul. Can anybody help? And I said, God, that sounds kind of familiar. It was the same lady. So then I was there. This is a picture from being there with Team Rubicon, and you can see all the debris in the background. Over 2 weekends, the whole property was cleared out so that she can use her very limited funds to try to rebuild a house and rebuild her life there. So one benefit is you really do help people in need, both in your local community and nationally and internationally. And then on the right is, it's just great teammates. So this was at Ray River Ranch, is a hunting camp or something up near Palomar. They've got a lot of infested trees that need to be taken out, and it's a great training opportunity. So I'm there with, let's see, Trevor, Mike, Carlos, and Manny. And so we were a strike team of 5 chainsaw activities, and the 4 of them were actually pretty good chainsaw operators and were tolerant of me. So you just meet the most interesting people and nicest people. How do you join? Well, after joining, it's easy, just join online. There's 2 online courses that take about an hour. It take actually about a half an hour. It talks about the history of TR and the culture, ICS 100 and 700, which I think all of us have. And then they do an automated background check. And then you're a member. And on the website, there's a calendar, and it shows you the multiple training activities, both now with COVID, everyone has to be vaccinated if you're going to meet in person. There's a number of in-person training events that you can choose from, lots of online ones that you can choose from, and also a calendar that will at any one time display 100 activities across the US that are going on in different cities that many you're welcome to join. So if you're interested, I think Rob sent out the teamrubiconusa.org is the website. It always comes up donate. Just click on the X to close that window, and it says if you're interested in volunteering. And Kevin is the Southern California State Administrator. That's his email address, and he's also would answer any specific questions you might have, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions and talk to you individually more about the organization. But it's one of the most interesting ones that I've ever belonged to, and having a little bit more time when I'm not on airplanes for work all the time. I do everything by Zoom now. It's given me a chance to be even more involved. So that's the end of the presentation. And if anybody has any specific questions now, I'd be glad to answer them, or I think we've got a plan going forward. So I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Judy, thank you very much. A wonderful presentation. For questions, people can raise their hands if you can find the raise hand button, or you can put something in chat and we'll read off the questions to Judy. So I'm looking for hands. I'm not seeing any hands yet. Oh, there we have a hand up. John, K6EPO, go ahead.
Yeah. How is Team Rubicon funded?
All by donations, individual donations, companies. They have a lot of relationships with companies. So steel, chainsaw, steel equipment. We get a lot of steel equipment. In case of the heavy equipment operators, they get their heavy equipment from some company that then can write that off. Home Depot is a big funder of Team Rubicon as well with respect to equipment. But it really is individual donations. And one of the tenets they teach you in the culture of Team Rubicon is, remember, your mother is a donor. So I've never seen an organization run as efficiently. It is all volunteers, which sometimes is a little bit of trouble. So there's 150,000 members. There are 142 paid members to run an organization that covers nationally and internationally. So it's quite efficient. And the reason everyone wears gray t-shirts, when it started, when Jake Wooden figured everybody ought to have the same color t-shirt, gray was the cheapest one to buy. And that's why it's a gray t-shirt.
Okay, thank you.
Looking for questions in chat or raised hands, or if somebody unmutes himself, we'll take that as a question.
There
You'll
is
need to
one in
check
chat.
You'll need to check for raised hands. I'm not seeing them on my side, Rob. So you've got
Yeah, I'm
point on
looking for
that.
raised hands. Don't see any.
Patrick
Oh,
has a question in chat.
yeah.
Our Team Rubicon teams listed by districts.
Yeah, they just changed. They're now by territories. There's west, east, south, and north. So west, the fire mitigation in Lost Valley the last 2 weeks was all of west. So we had Hawaii, California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Texas, New Mexico, represented Idaho, I believe also. And then, but the real important part of the organization is by metro areas like the Southern California, LA, Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino. That's where you really get to know a group of people. And they've even now organized, I think for the very first time, the hurricane response in Louisiana draws from people all over the country, but they organized a flight wave just for Southern California. So a whole bunch of the Southern California people are going to Houma, Louisiana in about 2 weeks, and we'll be working together. So that's how it's organized. And then there's international. There are Team Rubicon, Australia, Canada, UK, that have, when I was in Panama City, they had the whole Israeli contingent was there to help out.
I have a question.
Mhm.
On the local basis, it looks like some of the tasks that Rubicon performs overlaps with CERT. Do you interface with CERT or incorporate them into your Rubicon activities? How you work
Yeah.
together or what?
So we're always invited in by an organization. It's oftentimes FEMA. FEMA has figured out that Team Rubicon is really responsive and organized and doesn't self-deploy and things. But so whoever invites Team Rubicon in, we're part of the operation and interface with everybody there. I think I've been impressed with the leadership. I've spent my whole life sitting behind a computer figuring out what people ought to do. So I prefer to be out chainsawing and not in the leadership. But I tell you, the need for people who are like CERT trained, who can kind of step in to help with some of the organization. That's one of the biggest needs. But again, the TR only comes in when they're invited and interface and plays very well in the sandbox with everybody else, as best I can tell.
Jay, do you want to take the question in chat?
Yeah, do they have comm trailer or trucks for deployment? No, because it's interesting. We're there, like the hurricane response is after the active response is done. So maybe, except for the route clearance team. So in the first, maybe it's 2 weeks or so, where there are often comms have been set up because of all of the disaster organizations that are there, such as cell phone and all that. So there hasn't, and I haven't been on that many national ones, certainly in the first couple weeks after a hurricane. Hurricane Michael, I was there, was probably a month after so I've not seen that much need for comms trailers or trucks. But Rob gave the name Craig McVeigh, was a person from Las Vegas, was the person apparently who gave the talk about Puerto Rico. And a lot of times these very early responders, so if people are known in the organization as somebody who has those skills, then the national organization will find them and deploy them. But it's pretty unusual to need comms.
Dennis asked, what is the email domain name for Kevin K?
Let's see, let me just,
Judy, maybe you could post
Okay.
that in chat.
yeah, I got it here. It's .org. Kevin Cothlow at teamrubicon.org.
TeamRubicon.org.
Yeah. Any
We
other
have a hand
questions?
up, Dennis, N1TEN.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, Judy, you're a fairly petite person amongst some of the folks that you were pictured with. So I guess that begs the question, why chainsaws?
Oh, because I just love learning new things. I like being outside, and I like doing. I thought when I got deployed to Panama City. This is the very first thing I ever did with Team Rubicon. Get deployed. Can't find my name on the 204s. I guess the first day, and I'm looking, and it's because I'm not in a strike team. I'm leading one on damage assessment. I thought, well, that's interesting. That was 2 days. And then the next thing they had me do was lead a swamping team. So the first thing I asked was, what's swamping? And then the second, and it was a fireman and 2 ex-Marines, these 3 big guys and me. And swamping is when you follow the chainsaw team, and when they cut something, you pull it out. So we did that for 3 days. And I said, yeah, this is a lot of fun. But I said, boy, it looks like it'd be even more fun to be the sawyers, because they stand there and they really think about where's the compression in the wood, where's the tension, all this kind of analytical stuff. I love to overthink a problem. And so I wound up getting trained as a chainsaw operator, and the guys are really good. The Toby Keith song is my anthem. I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. So I can cut for maybe 15 minutes, and they'll then cut for, I'll spot them and they'll cut for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. So the guys are really nice. I think I try as hard or harder than everybody else, but it's just fun, and everybody is so supportive of the rookie, and some of these guys were born, I think, with a chainsaw in their hand. So if you want to learn something new, heavy equipment is hard. They only take people now that have some experience, but for chainsaws, lots of people train in chainsaws, and you can do as little or as much as you want. And if you want to just stick to bucking and limbing, you can do that. And if you want to fell trees and move up to advanced Sawyer 1 or Sawyer 2 or teach, you can work toward that as well.
Thanks, Judy. That was very interesting.
Any other questions?
What was that saying again? I'm not as good as I once was, but
I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. It's a Toby Keith song.
okay.
And I think that's truly my anthem. Any other
Looking for
questions?
hands, looking for comments or questions in chat.
I don't see either.
I was
Okay.
chuckling. You were talking about teaching people, training people, doing things, and I was thinking to myself, once upon a time, and this goes back to fires early in the 2000s that a lot of folks should probably do remember. And
2003.
yeah, being out in the East County where a lot of that activity was happening, and there was a lot of actual heavy equipment out there, and it was, my flashback was, this was kind of like being Sigourney Weaver at the second movie for the Alien series or the Alien franchise, where she's, kind of hanging out with all the Marines. They're all getting geared up, ready to go out and do things. They're trying to go out and load up the spaceship to go out and land on the planet and rescue the folks that are there. And she looks around and says, "What can I do?" And they said, "What can you do?" And she points at the Caterpillar loader and says, I can run that." And they're looking at her like, okay.
Say what? It's interesting in this organization, the 50-plus-year-old folks, a bunch of most interesting people, CEOs, the guy that owned the restaurant at the Rockefeller Center and owned one on Cape Cod, the guy that's a head sound engineer for like every movie I'd ever heard of. The one guy last week was the CEO of a construction company. So you've got that group of people, and then you've got the 20-something guys and women who maybe are now just separated from the services and are looking for what they're going to do in life. So I probably spend as much time talking to the young guys about, but what do you want to do? In 5 years, where do you want to be? And it really is rewarding to talk to some of these young people and to try to help them sort of think about the way forward, because, you know, after leaving the military, it's sometimes a little bit lost. So there's just every kind of person belonging to this organization that you can ever imagine that you would meet.
And that's all cool stuff. And I was imagining that was probably the case as well as you were discussing this, and just knowing the little bits and pieces I know about the organization as well. So we were literally out of a fire line or near a fire line, and you know, it was one of those scenarios where they had a lot of heavy equipment they were trying to move, and they didn't have anybody out there to move some of the gear. And I looked over and said, I can drive that. And they're like, you can? I'm like, yeah, I used to be able to. And the guy's looking at me and I'm pointing at a Cat D5. So he said, okay. He goes, only problem is we don't got any keys for that. I'm like, okay, that's not a problem. Got back in my vehicle, dug around for a set of keys, and I got a bunch of other keys on there for other backcountry purposes, and you know, got to go out and move something a quarter of a mile away roughly, which was very cool. Got it away from where they needed to go out and do work. Didn't lose a piece of equipment to a fire. And my friend Norm, who used to work at the top of that hill, who's no longer with us, looked at me and said, I saw you moving that. He goes, I saw you doing that, because I know that's why you were late getting up here. And I kind of chuckled. He said, you told me you were going to go out and move that one of these days, because they hadn't touched that in about a week. And I looked at him and I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Not licensed, not insured, but you know, there's a piece of equipment that didn't go by the way because we got to go out and move it. We had the right person in the right place at the right time. And I suspect Team Rubicon's a lot like that. I had a question about logistics, though. That was something I don't know that I have any information on. Regionally, do these folks have agreements with people to go out and get equipment when they need to, whether it's heavy equipment, whether it's trucks, things like that? Do they actually have, you know, MOUs set up where they can pull?
So I don't know about MOUs. Rental companies, they have big agreements with some of the rental companies that have things, but they have a national operations center in Plainview, Texas, or somewhere like that. It's a huge center that's got all of the equipment and big tractor trailers, you know, the hundreds of chainsaws and all that. And each region has their own. So when there's a disaster, when you know the hurricane is coming, they pre-position these big 18-wheelers near the disaster area and then respond that way. Here, I spent a whole day a couple of weeks ago, a Saturday, helping reorganize the cache of equipment in Oceanside. There's a storage place in Oceanside, and they now have, I think, 4 storage, locker things, 4 in a row. So the Southern California equipment is all there, and they've got, in addition, all of the chainsaw equipment is loaded in a trailer, and the trailer is parked at that storage facility. And then there's a second trailer at the storage facility that can be loaded as needed to move. So they've got a really pretty sophisticated logistics operation. And anybody who has an interest in logs, boy, it's something you really need. You could be a huge help to this organization. So they get a lot of donated equipment and trying to sort that out. And, you know, we're sorting out gloves and iPro and things like that. But they have every kind of equipment that you might need for a disaster or fire mitigation. And then they haul these, usually rental trucks, not personal vehicles, and haul these trailers to sites in Southern California or Northern California.
And from a competition perspective, and I don't mean to use the word competition from the typical sense, but from maybe a priority perspective, is there any, and if you don't know, that's okay, I'm just curious, is there any prioritization given to this group over anyone else that might just need something? If there's been a local event, do they have anything that's on reserve with these companies that they, again, it comes back to, I guess, an MOU type of arrangement, but is there an expectation that there's some reserve left with these folks that they have agreements with to be able to pull gear if they need it over maybe someone locally, or is it just first come,
yeah,
first
I don't
serve?
think that they're pretty self-contained. All the gear that they have, they're not pulling it quickly during an emergency. It's already in place. So when Home Depot or Steel donates something, it's then belongs to Team Rubicon, so they've got it all ready to go. And a lot of
Got it.
attention to readiness of gear, and very specific protocols for, let's say, breaking down they have steel MS 261s and 461 chainsaws, which are professional chainsaws and pole saws. And so everything is done to specs, so that whether you're in Maine or California, the gear is the same and it's cared for the same way.
Standardization's huge, especially for a maintenance cycle or anything like that. Cool. Anyone have anything else question-wise? Not seeing anything. Thank you so much again, Judy.